Welcome, folks. We're going to be working on the Unit 3 assignment where we're going to be retrieving data from two or more tables, basically using the join command, trying that out for the first time. Please be mindful of the fact that there's a document they have to download to do this work. And I've preemptively downloaded this as a Word document, so it is in my downloads folder here. So I'm going to open the document, and then I'm going to use the document as my guide to complete the exercises and as a place to store my answers, right? When I'm all done, I will submit the document with the screenshots in it and my SQL file if you want a backup of it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and enable editing on this, and then I will demonstrate by manipulating this, and I will read all of our instructions directly from here as well. Now, here we're being asked to use a very particular database, and it's not the same database that we were using previously, right? So before we were using the My Guitar Shop database. Now we're going to be using a database called Classic Models. And I forget if that comes from one of our book publishers or whatever, but let me show you where to get that database. So one of the first steps here is to get the database loaded, right? And that's kind of one of the unwritten parts of the assignment. I'll point you guys towards our course resources folder here, where the Classic Models database exists here as a SQL file. If you click that, you can go to download it, and that is now going to my downloads folder, and there it is. So it's just a SQL file, as is my habit here. So, and you guys don't have to be like me, by the way, is I'm opening up the SQL file, and yes, I'm doing it in Notepad++ on purpose. I just like to see what's inside my files, right? And I talk about this in many of my classes. Hey, you're bringing in a file, it's got stuff in it. Let's take a look. What are we contending with here before I start throwing it at my software programs? As we saw before, this will create a series of statements that will create a database. It will set it to use that database, create all the tables, insert all the information, and that's what we're seeing here. And if you notice, this is a pretty extensive file, right? This has got like almost 8,000 lines of text and code in it. And be thankful that we don't have to create this from scratch. Now we're going to load this up. This comes apparently from the MySQL tutorial website. So they use it for a lot of their examples. So our task will be first to download this, then we'll open it up inside of MySQL Workbench, and we will execute the entire file, which will build the database and add all the data. So let's kind of review how to do that. MySQL Workbench is up and running on my system right now. And as I mentioned at the start of class, MySQL Server is running as a service on my local machine here. So I am attached to that. Right now, I do have a bunch of tabs that are open here from the work that we were doing earlier in class today. So I'm going to close out all those tabs if they will just respond to my clicks. And I'm closing all of them. I'm going to collapse down my Guitar Shop schema. You will notice that I do have Classic Models already open here, right? So I have a little bit of a conundrum, and the conundrum is basically, here I am, I'm going to load this SQL file, and it's going to rebuild the database I already have. So I'm going to do a preemptive step and delete that database. So I'm going to just create a blank SQL file here. I'm going to attach to that database. I will zoom in so you guys can see what I'm doing. Got to spell it right though. All right, so I'm going to use the Classic Models database. Why? So that I can drop the drop database Classic Models, right? And these are not commands I want you guys to execute, by the way, unless you already have that database there and you need to get rid of it. So I'm going to execute all of these statements. So I'm just going to hit the lightning bolt on the left, and it did that. And as you can see in my schema table, it updated right away and it's gone, right? So now I'm okay, basically, to begin. All right, so now I'm going to delete those commands. We can come in here and type other stuff later. But for right now, we're going to open that script file that we just downloaded, and that should be in my downloads folder. And that one downloaded as MySQL sample database, which is the classic models database. All right, so opening that file, and there it is. And it's the same file that we were just looking at in my text editor, by the way. All right, it's just loaded here inside the product. I'm going to go ahead and tell this to begin. And I'm just going to hit the lightning bolt on the left. This will execute all the scripts inside. As we've discussed before, generally what we want to see in the output window at the bottom is all those green little check marks, right? That were good. There might be a couple of things, like if they run a command that doesn't do anything because it doesn't need to, it'll come up yellow. Or if there is some sort of significant problem, you'll get an error that's in red, right? And we need to pay attention to those, by the way. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the execute button. So here goes. And you can see it did a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm just going to scroll through the output window. I don't see any red so far, a couple of yellows. And I think this is from before. Okay, so we're okay. It looks like it all worked. And then what I want to do here now is I want to go back to my schemas table and I want to hit the little refresh so that I can see the database that I just loaded up. Right. So I want to make sure all you guys are good with this step, right? You got this database loaded, right? The place where you find this database is in the course resources folder in the left sidebar in the content area. If you're not finding it, let me know and I'll get you there. Very quickly, let's familiarize ourselves with our database, right? So I'm noticing that we have a number of different tables here. So a lot of the examples do center around similar types of activities. So this concept of like customers who place orders and we ship them and all that kind of stuff is a pretty good setup. And so we have a customers table, employees table, offices, order details, orders, payments, product lines, and products, right? And I'm not digging into each table, but I'll be real frank. If I was working with this database and this is the first time I was seeing it, and they're like, okay, you're working on this database now. Well, the first thing I would do, well, I would get it loaded up like this. I would start poking around in all the tables. I just want to see what's in there. So that should kind of be your mindset. And it can be very much as simple as clicking those little icons here and just going, okay, let's see what's in the customer table. Okay, we got names, info. There's an address line too, which has some nulls, and the states. Some things don't have states. Some don't have sales rep. There's credit limits. Okay, got it. Right. So I've got a picture in my mind of what's in that table. Right. And I know that seems like a cumbersome process, but you know what? This is a very useful process when it really comes down to it. And I don't want you to shortchange that process. You should do this. You should look at your data. You'll hear me say that a lot. And if you're looking at your data, you know, and you understand what your data is, when you see the output of your data, you're like, yeah, that's right. Or no, that's clearly wrong. And I think I gave examples last week, even like, for example, when we were looking at metrics here at Gateway once, and they were showing me how many graduates or I did or did not have in my data program. And then I'm like, we never had that many students in our program. How could we have that many graduates? And I realized the numbers you're showing me are wrong, right? And how did I know that? Because I knew my data, you know, and that those are really important takeaways, folks. All right. So you can look at all your tables if you wish. We don't need this tab open right now. And the original SQL file that we opened to build the database can now go away. Okay. So now we have a blank SQL file here to work with. And now we'll start looking at the tasks in the document and seeing what we can do. All right. So I guess we did that, right? All right. Please make sure to paste screen capture and show that the command and output and paste them into this Word document. And I'll show you guys how to do that. And we will join data from multiple tables. And normally when we say join, we'll be using inner joins. Yeah, that's going to be the predominant thing. And then you are being asked to save this with your last and first name. And I'm just going to tell you this very unofficially. I used to follow these policies in the past, but you know what? When you turn it in on Brightspace, it's already attributed to your name. You call that file whatever you want to call it. I'm good with it, right? So you don't have to really follow that format. Right. Step one, display the order number and customer name of all orders from the order table and customers table. Sort by customer name. You will need to join the order and customer table. And they're showing you an example of what the output will look like. All right. So I my memory is a little short. I guess I'm getting a little old or whatever, but I'm going to copy this, by the way, and I'm going to show you another technique that you might choose to use. Well, first of all, let's not get caught in the same situation we did earlier today. I want to issue a use statement and say use classic models. That's the name of our database. And we're just going to execute that statement. And now we are attached to that database. So everything else I do is going to be attached to that database. All right. Now I'm going to put in a quick little comment here and say number one. And you know what? Instead of doing it with the dash dash approach, I'm going to use the CSS style approach. And my web people will know what I'm talking about. Others won't. But basically, we can do what we call block commenting, which means have more than one line of text by beginning the comment, meaning, and by the way, comments are code that's not really read or executed. So we can start with a forward slash and a star, and then we end with a star and a forward slash, and everything in between those is ignored, right? So I'm going to number it, and then I'm going to paste in the description here, and yeah, it went way off the side of the screen, but I'm doing this for a reason, right? Because man, it's a pain. Like if you're working on something to have to bounce between screens and then come back, and so let's just paste it in here, and I have the example right in front of my face. That I can just look at and I don't have to bounce back and forth is really kind of the grand point. All right. So this first exercise will demonstrate a few different things, right? So we're going to do exactly what they say, but I'm going to also pepper in some other stuff. And I'm going to do this pretty regularly, right? So we're going to ramp up the basics. So generally, I'm looking for the basics from you, but there's no harm done in trying other techniques when you're in the process of it. So, like for example, we need to display the order number and customer name of all the orders from the order table and the customers table. But you know what? Can we review what I just did before, which is like, can we look at this data? And I say that kind of like in a weird way like that. All right, we just did the customers, and I'm like, okay, all right, but yeah, that's good. And then the other table was the orders data, right? Was that correct? And I don't even remember, so I'm going to look. Customers, order table and customers table. So we got orders and customers. So let's look at the orders table. What does that have? An order number, order date, a required date, a ship date, status, comments, maybe, and a customer number. All right. So what is the joining field between orders and customers? And then I want you to also notice why I moved my tabs around. Do you guys pick up on that? Right. And I'm thinking of this like left, right, and the circles and the overlaps and all that. So I think we're going to put orders on the left and then customers on the right, right? And so that's the diagram we're making. But clearly the joining field is the order number. So that's very, very helpful for us to know. So let's start writing the query. All right. Now, all right. So I'm going to write, first I'm going to start with the select statement, and I'm going to say select order number. Okay. So this is weird, and I'm stopping right in the middle of it. And like, how do I know that that's the field name? Well, I would look here, right? This is the customer table. This is the, okay, order number. That's the field name. And notice how this database isn't using the underscore approach, right? This is using camel casing to name the columns. All right. So knowing the column names is helpful. Another thing that you can do, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but if you are in your schema sidebar here and you click on one of the tables and highlight it, it shows you all the column names there. Pretty handy. A couple other tidbits you'll pick up here as you're looking at this. I'm going to expand this a little bit just so it's easier to see, is not only does it indicate all the columns, it also indicates their data type, right? What kind of information they hold. We'll talk about that later, but there's integers and characters of various lengths. And then it also has this little indicator here, this PK, which indicates primary key, which means whatever goes into this field with that PK, and I'm trying to highlight just that one, but I can't, has to be unique. So there's no order numbers that can repeat. Right? All those order numbers must be unique. So this is really kind of handy because it's like, what are my column names? Oh, darn, I forgot. And you don't have to run a query again. You can just click here and it brings up the column names and shows you, right? That's kind of the point of that. All right. So going back to this, so we're going to select the order number. I'm going to alias this. Remember, we were just talking about that. And then I don't want it to appear like that in my output. So I want it to appear like this in my output. How about that? That looks a lot nicer than what I have over there, right? And then we're going to also select the customer name. I'm going to alias that as well. I'm going to zoom out just a tad here because I'm getting a little large. And I'm going to alias that also in a more user-friendly name. And I'm just going to say customer space name because that will read nicer in the output. So those are the things I'm selecting from, and I'm going to show you kind of a different approach here. In this case, I'm not going to run a join command. I'm going to let this pull the data from both tables at the same time. And this is an alternate approach that I'm showing you. So I want you to be mindful of this. I'm not issuing the join keyword. I am just going to list both tables right here. So this is a different approach. And I'm going to pull from both tables, orders and customers. Okay. In essence, I'm joining, by the way. I'm going to order by customer name and the semicolon. All right, let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So I'm going to hit the lightning bolt on the right. Here's my query and here's my output. Now, if I look at my document, at my sample, is it kind of what it looks like? Order number, the customer name. Some of the customers have a bunch of orders, right? And is that what's going on here? Looks like Alpha Cognac. It's got a whole bunch. And then, okay, American Souvenirs, right? And you can see, by the way, you can adjust the columns if you are not aware. And you can just keep going and going and going, right? And this is not a small result set. This is a large result set. But notice the aliasing worked. So the column names are nicer. And all the information that we're looking for is the same. If I wanted to write a join statement, and so like if you guys are wondering, and I'm going to do I'm going to do an alternate version of this. I'm going to copy all this. All right. And I want to join customers, and see, I have this habit. I don't type enter. I just type, we're going to enter join customers. Now the question becomes, what are we going to join it on? And so this is kind of a backwards lesson here, with the two tables listed in the fashion I did before. And what am I joining the tables on? Okay, think of the examples we looked at. What is the joining factor? Well, do we have to look at our tables? Yeah, we should look at our tables. What's the joining factor? It's the customer number. So orders customer number and customers customer number, right? Okay, so let's give that a try. All right, and I lost my tabs here. There we go. All right, so I said from the orders dot customer number, where that equals the customers dot customer number. Okay. I'm not worried necessarily about ordering it at this point. And why? Okay, so let's talk about this. We haven't done any of this stuff either. I made a mistake here, and now I'm getting a red underline. What is this telling me? What is this mistake telling me? All right. In general, it's identifying an error, right? And then it says order is not valid at this position, expecting EOF stands for end of file, by the way, alter, analyze, begin, something, right? So it basically what it's telling me is I put a semicolon in a little too quickly, and that was the mistake. All right, I'm going to go ahead and run this query. So my cursor's on it, so I'm running it. Did it give me a different result set? You guys noticing that, right? Yeah. So what the first approach was, I'm going to put in a comment on this, without doing a join, just pulling raw data from both is what the first one did. This one uses a join. Now we should say inner. Let's be correct about it. And notice the difference in the results. And I should say that here. Notice the difference in the results. So what is, if we can verbalize it, what is the difference in the results? The difference in the results is that this is the overlapping part. So what was happening here? Did they not have, was there some piece of information that was not linking up? Yeah. Or are we seeing every possibility without seeing what was actually in the order? Was the order shipped? Was the order fulfilled? You know, et cetera. You know, if you think back to that video that we watched, it was kind of like that. Now with this join, especially this inner join, it gives us a little bit more finite control. So not only are the customers listed as customers, and they've also placed and added an order where this information matches up. That's really kind of the key here, right? We're still doing it alphabetically, and there is a little bit of truncating going on here, but it looks like a pretty complete list because it goes A to Z. I'd say this is a pretty good output. So this is going to be the answer that we're looking for here for this one. You may or may not have done it this way if you've already done it. So I get it. All right. So I'm going to take this up another notch now, right? And I'm going to use one more additional technique, and I'm going to do this in the process of answering the question. But here's one of the issues that we run into as database programmers is we're writing these statements and we're going like orders, that customer number, and like these expressions get pretty long. And thankfully the tables only call the orders and not like orders from out of state, you know, for example. And then every time I want to use that, I'd have to type that whole phrase. And so often what we do with some of these techniques, and I'm just going to show you this as we get going here, is we'll take the orders table and we'll do something like this. We'll put the letter O after it. And instead of typing orders from now on, we just type O. Or we might join customers and just type C. You see like where I'm going with this? And so that's another form of aliasing that I want to show you. Um, and that's really common because it accelerates the coding process significantly, especially if you're typing by hand. We've been kind of doing that with Python libraries too, like anybody who's in the machine learning class, where we alias the Python libraries that have a long name with the short thing. Same concept, right? We're just using it to shorten our syntax. Okay, so we're going to move on to number 2 here. There we go. All right, so let's read number 2. Wait, what did I forget? I forgot my screenshots. Let's take this example here, and I'm going to run this query one more time. I want to have the correct output on the screen. So if I were you guys and I was like screenshotting this for submission, I would kind of do it like this. This is what I would do, right? And then I would try to get it in one screenshot, but I realized that might not be feasible for everybody. But I would grab like this and some of the output, right? I don't expect like if it's 1,000 rows of output, I don't need to see that. I just want to see that it basically worked. I'm simply going to hit my copy command here in the snipping tool. And then I'm going to go back to that Word document. And where there's a graphic here, I'm just going to delete it and just drop in mine. Right. And this is how I want you to do it. So like each question, I want to see your code and I want to see your output. Right. And submitting your SQL file too is also helpful because that way, if I have a question about it or want to see the cleverness that you coded, I can pull it up and whatever. Plus, it's a backup. All right. So that's kind of the technique here. All right. I'm going to move that out of the way. I think you guys generally get how to do that, but I'm just showing you. If you're stuck on doing that process, let me know. Okay. Let's look at the. All right, but I also closed. What did I close my directions? Not very clever. All right. All right, back to the direction. All right, so number 2 says modify the query in number 1 to use the following aliases, right? And well, I kind of did these sort of a little bit, so I did use those aliases, but I'm also going to alias the table names. And to me, that's maybe a bigger takeaway. So here's me kind of racing ahead. What we're referring to is what I already did here, right? These are the aliasing, but I didn't do order. No, I did this. So that's the only difference there. All right. So if we're going to basically take the same query and tweak it, let's go ahead and do the tweaking here. So I already told you that I can take these tables. So from the orders table, I can call it O, and I'm using a lowercase o, and the customers table, I will call it C. There's no keyword that goes in between. That just shows us what the alias is directly, right? So anywhere where I'm pulling in a column name, now, where is this column coming from? Well, the order number is in the orders table. So I'm going to go O dot order number. So now it tells me the table too. Right. And see how nice and short that is? Where before it was assumed. And the customer name is coming from the customers table. So I'll use a C in front of that. When I do the where here, well, this already has the table name. Now I can just get rid of all this verbose syntax here and trim it down. And you see why that's advantageous, right? And once again, I had 2 single word table names. What if the tables literally were called orders from out of state? Right? You just don't want to type that, right? Just alias it for the sake of making it go faster. The alias for a table is declared when we're doing our froms, right? Alias for column output is done in the select, right? So multiple forms of aliasing here. Now we're going to order by, but customer name is also coming from the customer table. So we're going to do a C dot customer name. Right. And, you know, if you want to add comments to this up here, Oh, that's not what I meant to copy here. This might be helpful verbiage, right? Table aliasing and columns too, right? This is the table aliasing. This is the column aliasing. All right, let's run it. All right. This is our output. I mean, should this output be significantly different than what we just did? Not at all. Right. The thinking was really that we didn't have these column aliases before, but we did. That was me racing ahead. I apologize. But in the background, the query is running with aliasing on the tables too, which make our fully qualified column names with table names a lot more precise. All right, let's move on to exercise 3 here and see if we can get that done before we leave here. Otherwise, we'll have to hit it next week. All right, so let's start number 3 at the very least. I'm going to say number 3, and let's go read number 3. Modify the query in number 2 to only include the customer name Bain mini imports. All right, so that should be pretty simple. So that tells me right off the bat, I can take this, or at least take number 2 and copy it, right? Makes sense, right? So we can get this one done. But we want to not only do everything we're doing already, like everything here is working just fine, but now we want to have a second qualification. And really, when we're trying to like narrow down on stuff, we usually do it in the where clause. This is where we set our selection criteria. And I could just right here put in and then type on this line. I'm going to take it to the next line now. That's how I'm going to prefer to do it. So right here, I'm going to say and. All right, what thing am I looking for? The name of the customer. That's going to come from the customer table. So I'm using C, and then customer name from the customer table. We don't use an equal sign here. We say like, which is the search word, right? Which is kind of like saying this text is like this text. And then we're going to use the exact name of the business. I got to make sure I spell it right because it's Bain with 2 A's for some reason. Bain mini imports. It's probably like a kiosk in a mall, like in the middle of the mall when you're trying to walk through. So there's the thing. Now, keep in mind when we're using the and keyword, and this would be the same really as having it all on one line, right? When we're using the and keyword, we have to be able to find the customer number in both tables. So customer that did place an order, and that customer name has to be Bain Mini Imports. So when I hit the run on this, that's all that should come back, right? So that's your output for number 3. So aliasing the tables, aliasing the comments, only those that have placed orders, and specifically Bain mini imports. Now, let me ask you a question. In principle, do I need the last statement? And this is one of those like geeky, nerdy coding things. In reality, right? I don't have to order it by customer name anymore because it's only going to be one customer. Right? So you could really eliminate that statement. And, I left it in last time. I'm looking at my solution. I'm leaving it in this time because it doesn't do any harm. But from a coding standpoint, irrelevant. Why is that relevant? Because when you're a coder and I throw this at a big system, right now I just processed, I don't know, 1,000 records, not a big deal. If I throw it into a system and I'm processing 1,000,000 records and it's performing that operation each time, irrelevant. I'm wasting processing power. This is how techno nerds think. It's like, which code is more efficient? Well, I don't need this code because it's not going to do anything, right? So if you want to think like that, there you go. When we come back next week, we'll start with number 4. And we have, I think, 2 more exercises. So you would try those on your own if you wish, but we will complete the last 2 next time we get together. Just to be on the safe side here, I have a working SQL file, so I will go ahead and do a save on it, and I'm going to put it in the spot where I will put my homework for this class this semester, which is this folder here. And this is my unit 3 multi-table join SQL, something like that. Call it whatever you want. Call it assignment if you wish, and save it. But all your stuff is now together. So when you come back next time, if you close MySQL Workbench, by the way, this will stay in there when you bring it back up. If you, for whatever reason, close the files, at least now it's saved and you can retrieve all of your work. And what you will notice is all the stuff that we're doing here is kind of building off of the previous example. So that's why it's kind of helpful to have those available. All right, folks, this recording ends here.